Well, as you can see from the table, we are finally getting to the fun stuff. And there is no way in the world that I'm trying to install all this inside that engine compartment. So it's time for the LT1 to come out. And after reading all the arguments both ways on the forums, I think what looks like the best option is to drop the whole K-member out the bottom of the car. So I watched 3 or 4 YouTube videos of people removing LT1s, and I also read write-ups, one on bangshift.com and one on LS1 Tech. And I've made my list here of things that I know need to come apart. And as I go through the process, we'll see what I forgot, and I'll mark that down too. Well, it turns out I may have been a little heavy-handed on these clamps, and basically I kind of dimpled the pipe onto the header. So I think the only way to get it off of there would be to cut a slit in the pipe and basically peel it off of the collector. And I don't really want to do that, but I don't think it's going to hang me up too bad. I think basically this can just all stay in one piece and come down together. Perfect. So these three little wires here, they go to that connector right there, which is probably some kind of HVAC valve, but it just pops off of there. Now, finally, now everything comes up into the engine compartment. I'm not really sure I would do it this way again. To work on the engine, I got to get all the sensors unplugged from it anyway. So I might as well just do that in the engine compartment and leave the wiring harness in the car. But everybody seems to want to do it this way. So I don't know. It's the first time doing it. Next time I might try modifying the process just a little bit. Alright guys, I think I've got everything disconnected and separated here between what's going to come down with the K-member and what's going to stay with the car. By the way, a glove works pretty well for catching all the ATF coming out of the tail shaft there. So I'm down to one bolt with just a few threads on my trans cross member. I should be able to reach in and get that with a ratcheting box end once the car is down. So here's the wire for my wideband O2, since that's going to stay with the car. I've got it looped up here in such a way that the cross member should just pass down from under it and not catch it. Same thing with my fuel pump wires. I've undone all the zip ties so that it should be free from the engine and transmission as it comes down. Just kind of giving everything the once over and making sure it looks good to separate down here. Alright, all 6 of those K-member bolts are broken loose. Alright guys, it's getting real. So I've got all the K-member bolts out except for the back one on both sides. And we've also got all the bolts out of the transmission cross member except for one on one side. I've got this piano dolly with these boards stacked up. And I believe the transmission pan should touch the boards right about the same time the tires touch the ground. So I'm going to go ahead and lower the car down a little more, and it should land on all 3 of those points. And then I'll just take the rest of the bolts out. Okay, it's coolant all coming out of the front of the engine. So I guess when the transmission pan set down and the car kept coming down a little bit, it must have just leaned the engine forward slightly, so a little more coolant's coming out. So I guess that's a good sign. All right, I'm going to try to get that last bolt out of the trans cross member. Trans cross member is unbolted. All right, last K member bolts out on the driver's side. Okay. Last K member bolts out on the passenger side. All right, the transmission cross member is unbolted. The K member is unbolted. The K member has sagged about 2 inches down from the frame rails. The engine's obviously sitting lower in the engine compartment. The last bolts in here are these upper shock mounts. Okay, good. All right, one thing I didn't think about is my wideband O2 installation. That goes into the wire harness, the PCM harness, and it also goes into the car, the instruments. So I'll probably have to end up cutting a connection there because I think I soldered those. So there's probably 2 wires I'm going to have to cut, and then I'll go back together with spade connectors for the future. So I'm just making sure everything is kind of free and can move. One thing I didn't have on my list was the brake booster vacuum hose, so fortunately I spotted that before it got stretched. All right, so it looks like my brake lines go through another one of these clamps down there. So I gotta get that apart. It might end up permanently apart. All right, brake lines are free. Throttle cable? Oh, it's it's a cruise control. Fuel pump wires came free, that's good. Brake lines are gonna have to snake their way out from behind. I think that's cruise control. I wonder if I can move that. All right, cruise control is untangled from the, well, no, not quite. There we go. Cruise control is untangled from the brake lines now. Our steering reservoir is free. Not hanging up the wiring harness anywhere. Go for another bump. Hopefully this thing comes back down. But... All right, it looks like I didn't get the positive battery lead that goes to the starter. So it's pulling real hard on my, I've got this battery disconnect and it just pulled that disconnect apart. Fortunately, that's a cheap part. So if I was gonna break something, that's not that bad. Okay, good. I think it's gonna make it. But I think when I go back in, I'll remove the alternator first. I'm pretty much committed with it at this point. I don't know where I was on these battery leads. Still pretty stable. Okay. Those sound like noises. All right, I think those noises are the shock tower scraping against the inner fender well on its way down. So I think that's fine. All right, there's one heater hose that looks like it's kind of stuck on the alternator and trying to ride the engine down. All right, that's okay, got it. I think we're good to go. Car's still nice and stable on the lift. Whoa, okay. I think the alternator is free of the body now. Well, there you go, guys. All right, your job is to remind me that the longer one goes on top. All right, guys, the engine is out. Things I would do differently next time. The jury's still out a little bit, but I might prefer to disconnect the harness from the engine and leave the PCM and the harness in the car. Not really sure, but that might go a little smoother. And also, I'd go ahead and remove the alternator first. It kind of hung up a little bit coming out. Made it out okay, but it would have gone smoother without it. But then you have to remove it anyway because you're going to want to keep the power steering pump with the K-member. And the alternator has to come off for the power steering pump to come off. So you might as well just take it off first. If you want to see what's going to happen to this engine next, be sure you're subscribed. Thanks a lot. See you next time.